Hi, Homeworthy. I'm River Spencer. Come on in and let's take a look around my house.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
I'm River Spencer. I'm an interior designer based in New Orleans, Louisiana. I do work throughout the city of New Orleans as well as the Southeast and all parts of the United States. I live here with my husband, Guy, and my chocolate lab, Birdie, and then Busy, my beagle mix. So the reason that I was drawn to this particular home when I was searching for our first home as a married couple was multiple reasons. This home does have some age on it. The original part of the house was built in the 1890s, and then it was added on to, I think, several times. It's on a double lot in uptown New Orleans, and it's gated all the way around, and that was helpful with having dogs. I did have to do extensive renovations to the house since we bought it 7 years ago, and I continue to do renovations on it over time, adding things. But I was really drawn to it because of the layout. In uptown New Orleans, because the houses were built so long ago, the floor plans don't really lend themselves to modern amenities. In this house, we use every single inch of this house in a functional way, and we're able to have a larger kitchen space, nicely sized bathrooms and closets. Welcome to my kitchen and breakfast area. This was the first space that I tackled when my husband and I bought the house about 7 years ago. It had awful tile on the floor, and we renovated the entire thing. But I'm lucky to have this elongated space where I'm able to have like a long island and then have enough room to have storage everywhere. I took the cabinets to the ceiling. I matched the original floors with what we call pickling in New Orleans. They're antique pine floors that we then use several different stains to create a layered grayish white kind of tint. And that's kind of a thing that's unique to New Orleans. And I decided to do that throughout the first floor. But this was the initial space that I decided to renovate when we moved in. I chose premium Calicotta marble, which was quite the investment. And it took, 5 slabs, 3cm slabs to get installed, but I love that it has a lot of movement. With a completely white backdrop of my kitchen, it gives the space interest because it has so much veining, and it even has some deposits, some iron deposits in it, which most people don't really like, but I like how natural it makes it look. As far as being an interior designer and choosing things for my clients, one of the biggest questions I get is, why marble? It stains, it's porous. And to me, I look at it like it's a natural stone. It's a living stone. And so over time, it's going to develop a patina. You have to think about all these old bars in New Orleans or in Paris even that have etching and stain on them, and it just gives them more richness. You don't want everything to be sterile. And one of the things that I have to fight against when I'm designing any space is to not make it sterile. I want everything to be neat and clean and symmetrical and perfect, but you have to add in that warmth to be able to achieve something that's really unique and special in a work of art. I love this area, which I kind of use like a makeshift butler's pantry. And I have a lot of different collected sort of seasonal serving dishes. I've got my grandmother's china. One of my favorite things that everybody on Instagram loves to see is my custom silverware drawer. So when my maternal grandmother died, every cousin got to choose a diamond ring of hers. I said, y'all can have the diamonds. I want the silver. So I got her silver, and this is what I did. So you might want to get a close up. But this is a custom felt lined Barbie pink silverware drawer for my silver, and I entertain a lot. My husband and I don't have kids. We live here with our 2 dogs, but we do have a lot of dinner parties and formal parties and have people over and entertain all the time. And it's one of the things that I really enjoy about this house is that it lends itself to nice entertaining. As you can see, it's a long linear space, and we're able to have casual dinners where we entertain at the bar. And then also every morning we'll have breakfast together and read the paper and talk at this breakfast table over here. One of the main things that I was interested in when I was renovating the kitchen, other than creating really that classic kitchen look, was taking the cabinets all the way to the ceiling. It's one of my pet peeves in houses is when you have tall ceilings, which 12-foot ceilings make everything look better, is to really take the cabinets all the way to the ceiling and then wrap the crown all the way around. And I chose a 3-piece crown for that. Everyone is always asking what my go-to paint colors are, and I sort of alternate depending on the style. In this kitchen, I chose Benjamin Moore OC17 White Dove. And one little trick that I actually use in my design work is when I'm working with whites, I don't change the color or shade of white that I'm working with, and I don't change the hue. I change the sheen, but use the same color. And it allows your eye to just effortlessly kind of go over the entire space without being stopped by one white that makes another one look yellow or gray, and everything looks different in every space depending on the way that the light hits it. So that's just one little tip. One other sort of thing that I use to create warmth, depth, or interest in a space is by collecting things, and I think this is really special. These are little spice jars that a dear friend of mine gave me for my birthday one year, and she said that she had been collecting them off of eBay for several years before giving them to me. And so they're these little vintage from the 90s Lenox carousel spice jars. I think it's kind of neat touch. I used lavender as an accent in this room, and you'll notice over here where the breakfast area is, this beautiful Mallory Page painting. Mallory Page is a New Orleans artist, and a little known fact about her is that she is the daughter-in-law of George Rodrigue, who's the Blue Dog guy. Mallory is an established artist in her own right, and she creates beautiful, emotional and thoughtful abstracts. And I got this piece, I believe, through Martine Chasson, who represents her here in New Orleans. Another piece of art that I use to sort of punctuate the design in the kitchen is this portrait of our beagle, Busy. And it, again, has lavender, lilac and lavender hues, and it is by New Orleans artist Jason Horton, who does these beautiful, realistic animal portraits, among other things. One other thing that I would note with my kitchen is this Murano glass Italian custom lilac chandelier that I commissioned. So another thing that I find important in a kitchen is treating the hardware and the plumbing fixtures sort of the way you would treat accents or jewelry. So I used all roll fixtures, and on my kitchen I used a roll bridge, but it's more of a transitional to modern look. It's not the traditional bridge faucet. Can't remember the name of this one. And then I used another roll over here. And this is the type of finish that it is unlacquered brass, meaning it's a living finish that can tarnish over time. And a lot of the design questions I get are based off of, what finish should I do if I do brass? Well, first I get, can I mix metals? The answer is yes. I chose not to here. The next most asked question is, if I do brass, what finish do I use? Do I use one that will always look brass, or should I use the one that's unlacquered brass that will change over time? And it's a personal decision. If it bothers you, then you want to use a lacquered brass. And if it doesn't bother you, then I think that an unlacquered brass that patinas over time is more interesting. Now I'm going to take you into my foyer. Right, this is our foyer, and it has a connecting hallway that makes it kind of smaller and linear, so there's not much of an opportunity before you hit the stairs to do anything, but I always have a vignette here, and it does change over time. But the one thing that really stays in my foyer is this beautiful painting by my friend Kevin Gillentine. Kevin Gillentine is a wonderful New Orleans artist who's originally from Tupelo, Mississippi, and he and his partner Vincent are dear friends of mine. I use a lot of his artwork in my designs because his landscapes that are abstracted are very calming. They're ethereal, and I just find them to be very beautiful. So I've had this piece for a long time, and it is the one thing that has stayed. Right now, I have this beautiful antique console. I love to have something that's kind of crusty with a marble top. And then it's accompanied by this antique fauteuil. And I'll explain the difference between a French bergère and a French fauteuil, which is a very common question that I get in my design practice. And we just call it a fauteuil, meaning an armchair, because it is not connected from here to here. If it were connected, it would be what we call a bergère. So anyway, that's just a little lesson. It has a little lumbar pillow that has antique vestments on it from one of my best friend's aunt is the maker of these pillows, Emily Alexander. The next thing that I'd like to tell you about my foyer is this antique pedestal. It's neoclassical pedestal. I believe that it's 19th century. I'm not sure. I just know that it's neoclassical. And then this piece of art, which this sculpture artist's name is Rod Moorhead, and he works out of Oxford, Mississippi, which I went to Ole Miss. So it's nice to have sort of meaning or an attachment to one of the pieces of art that I have. But I love the pieces that he does. They're so unique. This is a Fury. He does a very limited amount of Furies, and I actually have 2 of them. So it was hard to find something to sort of dress the foyer up while still paying attention to scale and not overcrowding it with furniture. And this was a good way to do that. So if you have a very narrow space in your home, a pedestal and a sculpture on top is a good way to dress that space. Right off of my entryway is what we use as our powder room. It's actually a full bath, but we don't use it that way. We don't really need the other part of it. So I just put up this Leontine Linens shower curtain. And Leontine Linens is a New Orleans-based fine linen company. Look it up, you won't regret it. The powder room is swathed in this Lee Joffa grass cloth. It's floral, it's very girly. And it's one of the spaces that's so small that I was able to kind of go over the top with it. I didn't actually replace the console sink that was already here, but I did upgrade the plumbing, and y'all heard me talk about how I like to use plumbing fixtures as like the jewelry of the house. And this is an exceptionally beautiful, I think it's Perrin and Rowe fixture, and I love kind of how ornate it is. And then above it is this Venetian mirror that I found in Parma while I was traveling and sourcing antiques. And then it's accompanied by some Julie Neal, who's another New Orleans lighting designer, sconces. And then we just had my workroom make this custom silk skirt. This is actually Josh Young, who's a great artist out of DC. I think this is just a print. And I liked the idea of, I changed this around a lot, but I liked the idea of using this like very modern piece next to this very frilly traditional wallpaper. And so that's kind of what I mean when I talk about creating tension in order to create good design or interest in a space. The only thing I'll really say other than that about the powder room is that I had my wallpaper hanger cover my trash can in the grass cloth, which was kind of fun. I would say that I land somewhere in between traditional and transitional style. However, I have a big emphasis on antiques and the curation of collections and special pieces that I collect over time. I like clean lines and I use a lot of restraint. So, you know, Coco Chanel has that line, like when you're getting dressed and you look in the mirror, you're about to walk out the door, always take one thing off. And I apply that mantra to my interior design aesthetic. So I guess I would say that I like to create spaces that have a specific sense of place and point of view, which I'm sure all interior designers do that, but for me, it's more about collecting things over time to lend depth to a space, like using original art, which I'll show you as we tour my house. Now come with me into my double parlor. So this space, as you can see, is very large and very linear. So I believe the rug that I have in here is 26 feet long by like 13 and a half. The intention with that, and I started with that, it's a beautiful Stark rug, and Stark rugs are simply the best. The intention with that was to unify the space. If you have a space that's sort of awkward architecturally, the best way to make that space feel warm or feel like one space totally is to do a rug that's as big as you can do it. It'll make it feel cozy and then also cohesive at the same time. The room, as you can see, is covered in Susan Harder wallpaper. So it's actually, she's an artist and she's based, I think, in Washington State. And she took her artwork and then created this wallpaper company and scales it onto your wall. And it's kind of like working with Gracie or decor. It's a very high-end wallpaper company and it's very involved. You have to provide elevation. So you always want to go through an interior designer if you're choosing to use one of Susan Harder's papers. I chose this one to wrap my space in for another unifying aspect, and also because of the soft, soothing colors and the backdrop that it provides. So it also makes the space feel warm. I mean, I have 12-foot ceilings and then just a very long room. So you're trying initially when you're designing a space to make it feel like one whole thing. Another trick I used was to create different conversational areas with the layout. So I have two back-to-back sofas with a console in between, and these are wonderful Baker sofas. And something that I'll say about large scale upholstery, and as you can see, my dog Birdie has already gotten on the sofa. So it's a constant battle for me to keep things clean. But one of the things that I do for my clients and for myself is to try and use indoor-outdoor fabric whenever I can. So this is an indoor-outdoor boucle. And fabrics, performance fabrics have come a long way in the past couple of years. So I would look into that if you're looking to recover a large piece of upholstery. And while I'm on that, I will say that people are always saying, well, I don't want to use white because it will show dirt. And my response to that is, well, wouldn't you rather know if you're sitting in filth and that you need to clean your sofa, the dirt is still there. So, and in the same vein of using, different shades of neutrals for large scale upholstery, which obviously I did here, you want to kind of counteract that with by using collected pieces so it doesn't feel too sterile or staged, but also using antiques. And again, I'll go back to like the warm wood. I use different time periods of antiques in the same space, and you have, in order to really do that well to where it looks like everything is talking to each other and it makes sense, you have to understand a little bit more of the history of antiques and know what you're talking about in order to do that well. But again, if you love something, then let it ride. So I punctuated my very neutral upholstery, my neutral large rug with collected pieces that then have accent fabrics. So like for example, when I'm doing pillows, I'll often use like a more modern, this is a Scalamandra fabric mixed with a traditional damask Fortuny. And yes, I am letting my dog be next to my Fortuny pillows, and that's just part of it. So this area, this conversation area, is really used for TV, and you'll see behind you there's a really big bookshelf and a frame TV, which helps. Like that's a good tip for if you want to have modern amenities, but you want it to look good. You can always use a frame TV and put a nice bezel on it, and you can, when you're not watching it, you could show artwork on it. So this area is really used in a more casual way, whereas this area on the other side of the room is used more for entertaining. So we'll have like a game night and people will sit over here, or if we're having a dinner party, we'll have cocktails on this side of the room. And if it's a larger party, obviously we'll use both. But I liked creating an original layout for this space. One of my favorite things in this room is this wall of mirrors, which this is just a bunch of collected sunburst and smaller antique mirrors that I had installed as sort of one piece of art. And then this painting here is actually by my own mother. So the one that I really, really wanted, I couldn't afford at this point, and I needed something for a photo shoot. And I said, Mom, will you please create an abstract for me? And she dutifully did it, and I think it looks great. I don't even want the, really fancy, expensive one anymore. And it has meaning because my mother did it for me. This vignette, which I love an antique, obviously, and a lot of people find Biedermeier, which is what this piece is right here, to be a little bit more masculine, and because it has accents of black, they're not as drawn to it as maybe they are to a Louis XVI piece or a pretty burlwood chest. This is a beautiful burlwood, but it is Biedermeier. Biedermeier tends to be a little bit more orange because of the wood that it's made out of, and it is Austrian or German rather than French or Italian. But I love this piece because of its masculine energy. And then I juxtaposed it with this beautiful abstract piece, which if you can't really tell unless the light hits it in a certain way or you get close to it. But this is Karina Gentinetta, and she is represented, I believe, in Atlanta by Prior Fine Art, and then Alpha Gallery in Boston. I think those are the only two places where you can get her work. But I loved the coloring of this, and I thought that it offset the soft blues and greens really well in the room, and made a nice, strong statement. And sometimes a trick that I'll use when creating a tall vignette like this with 12-foot ceilings is, so you have a chest, and then you have an abstract above it, and then sometimes I will pair an antique mirror, whether it's a Venetian or a smaller scale 18th century Paraclos mirror like this over it, and it just creates a really nice vertical moment. The next thing that I'd like to point out about the space is that instead of using a traditional light fixture, I chose to use a more modern light fixture it's a Julie Neal, again, a New Orleans lighting designer, a Julie Neal piece that I think was inspired by some Italian lighting from the 70s, but she used different materials, different scale, all of that. And I just felt that it added sort of a fun air to the space, because you don't want anything to be too staid, crusty, or still. You want to create something that feels, a space that feels alive. And so to me, that was a nice way to do it. The house didn't come with these beautiful medallions, but luckily in New Orleans, we have such amazing resources that you can go to places like Ricca's Architectural Hardware or this place called The Bank, and you can get beautiful ceiling medallions. And so I did that for several spaces in the house. And if you look up, one of the most interesting things about this room was that I put lattice on the ceiling. And that is a different choice that not a lot of people would make, but I wanted, again, I used it as a unifying feature for the double parlor, and to just, create interest for the space. My contractor was very confused. So was my husband, and it took a lot of math, and I'm not great at that. So it was a labor of love, definitely when we renovated and put it in. But I think it's worth it, and I enjoy it. And it's been there about 7 years now, and I don't want to change it. So that's saying something. Next, I will talk to you about these beautiful chairs. Which one of the ways that I like to create interest in a space, because I'm using limited color often, is these are actually cowhide upholstered antique chairs that I got from somewhere in Dallas. And then I added this Samuel & Sons beautiful gimp to trim them out. But if you're looking to create a neutral palette, but to still make it interesting, you can always vary texture, and that's a really good example of that. So one of the architecturally interesting elements of this room is this fireplace, which is original to the original part of the house, so from the 1890s. And a lot of the uptown New Orleans fireplaces don't work, and it would take a lot to get them working. There's a fireplace on this side and also on the other side in my husband's study, and neither of them work, which I really wish they did. And if we stay here long enough, I may fight to get it working. I love a working fireplace. But what's interesting about this is that it had its original, what we call a summer cover. And these are actually hard. It's hard to find them with their original summer covers on them. It was black. They're usually black, but I didn't like the way it looked, so I painted it. It also had a tile that I didn't like, so I did change that. And purists wouldn't want to do that, but I believe in creating things that you love. So I think it's okay to change like a surround on a fireplace mantle like this. So I just used some leftover stone from my kitchen renovation, and it is premium Calicut Gold. And then above the fireplace, these types of mirrors, a Tremont mirror, it's something I use quite often in my design work. So especially when I had my antique store, I had a lot of these, and I have a thing for antique mirrors. So obviously you can see. So this is an original. I don't think it's period, but it is a Louis XVI French Tremont. You can tell that it is older because it has the original glass in it. If you ever see like a line running through a large Tremont like this, and they're two pieces of glass, you can tell that it's the original glass, which shows age on the mirror. I will say that technically calling it this a Tremont isn't completely 100% correct, but we do that anyway. If it were a real Tremont that actually came out of a chateau, it would have an actual painting above where the mirror portion is. But I don't really like those. So I like the ones that have the carvings above them. But this is a particularly nice one that I've had for a long time. And I think that the scale works really well. New Orleans is one of the only places, maybe Charleston being another one, but they don't really love French, where you can use pieces like this because the ceilings are so high. Most ceilings in New Orleans are 12 feet, and I think, I don't want to misspeak, but I think that's mostly because of how hot it was here before air conditioning, and heat rises. So, but it does create a nice interior environment. So another example of creating collections and layering in antique and vintage pieces in a house. This is a good example, and I love to have fresh flowers, and I'll show you in a little bit where I do my cutting. And I just put a little bit of fresh viburnum and lisianthus. This is a vintage crystal vase, and I have them in all different shapes and sizes. This one is Waterford. Some of them are, some of them are not. But I keep a collection of both inherited from my mother-in-law, and then some from my grandmother, some from my mother, and then some bought or thrifted at different antique booths, shops around. You can find wonderful crystal at the most unexpected places. So it doesn't have to be an expensive, fancy shop, because for some reason people don't value these things as much anymore, and I love them. So I make sure to have a big collection of crystal vases, and I try and keep fresh flowers in them every week. Obviously, I did a little something special this week for these, but you'll see punctuated throughout my house different sizes of crystal vases with flowers in them. So right off of my double parlor is my dining area. So the dining room in my house plays a large role because I entertain a lot. I have a lot of different custom linens, different place settings. I even have inherited some beautiful chargers from my grandmother. And I really like to have people over and be in my space and entertain. And ultimately, you want to create an environment that is both beautiful but also comfortable for your guests. And I focus on that a lot. That being said, the table that you see here is actually something that I designed. So I drew it and then gave it to, it is completely made out of marble, and it has two big fluted marble bases. It took, I don't know, 7 men with a ramp to get it in here. And my husband sometimes worries about it falling through the floor because our house is raised, like most houses in New Orleans. It's raised so it doesn't flood. The table is a very modern moment for me, and so it is juxtaposed with these, and these are actually newer chairs. I mean, they're made in North Carolina chairs instead of antique, but they are more traditional in look. They are Louis XVI style chairs that I had covered in a performance velvet, this just a very neutral champagne velvet. So if you have any spills, you don't really have to worry about it. And then I had my workroom create this runner out of the same fabric. And I always like to have a table runner on my table. I just think it makes it look a little bit more finished. And I love my, I think these are about 120 years old, candelabra, my silver candelabra. I actually got them from Worthmore Antiques on Magazine Street. And Magazine Street is just such a mecca for antiques. And so if that's something you're interested in, I would highly recommend exploring all of the wonderful shops on Magazine Street. Anyway, the rug that I used underneath the dining table is an Uşak rug. Uşak rugs are Turkish. It's named for a region as well as a type of pattern. And I like to use Uşak rugs that are lighter in color. You find them, they run the gamut in color. You can get very vibrant ones or very subdued ones, and I like the more subdued ones. And you can always tell the quality of a rug based off of the pile. Well, that's one of the things you can tell about it. So if it's an Uşak with a lower pile and it's actually from Turkey, then it is a real Uşak and it is a nice high quality rug. It does not have to be vintage or antique for it to have value and be a nice rug. It can be, you can just kind of look like that. They jump way up in price when you go to actual vintage or antique Uşak rugs. The next piece that I'll talk about, this whole vignette, is, and this is a good example of creating tension and juxtaposition in design to create good design. So, in my opinion, because all of this is subjective after all. So this enfilade or buffet sideboard that I will talk about is, I purchased it from Jan Showers, who I admire and love so much and has been so kind to me. She has a wonderful showroom in Dallas that everyone should visit. But this is an antique that she told me she bought at the Pousse, the Saint-Ouen, the Marchand Pousse, which is the antique, the famed antique market in France, which is where a lot of us in the trade buy things. And now the pricing has just gotten out of control over the past 10 years. But when I first started doing this, that was where a lot of things came from, and still some things. But anyway, Jan said that she got this piece, which is actually an art moderne, which is the period that comes like directly after Art Deco. An art moderne buffet from the late 1920s. So it's just barely considered an antique rather than vintage, because it has to be 100 years old if it's going to be, generally, to be considered an antique, rather than vintage is about 25 years old. This is a very clean lined, dark piece of beautiful wood furniture with nice brass ferrules on it. And I love a pretty feminine cabriole leg. So it's very clean in its design. And then it's juxtaposed with this very ornate, feminine, I believe it's either Louis XIV or Louis XV. I couldn't get a straight answer out of the dealer I bought it from at the Marché Biron, which is part of the Pousse in Paris. And I found this on one of my travels probably 10 years ago now. And it was mostly intact, which I was grateful for, because you don't really find mirrors of this scale and caliber and carving with all the florets and everything on it that are still intact. Now the mirror part is a little bit broken, and most people would want that fixed, but it doesn't bother me. I think it adds to the patina. So the point that I continuously keep trying to make is to create good design, use something clean lined with something that's very ornate, and you create visual tension in that way. So this mirror serves as the very ornate antique piece, whereas this is the cleaner, more modern piece that sits beneath it. This is also very functional because it's holding all of my linens and some of my china. These are Ralph Lauren lamps, just very clean and a little bit more masculine. And then I do these arrangements of hydrangeas and garden roses. Well, actually, these are spray roses. I meant to have garden roses, but they ran out. And this is a beautiful rock crystal bowl that I usually keep here or in the center. This light fixture, again, is another Julie Neal that's inspired by an Italian 70s waterfall chandelier. And I think it just adds a lot of glamour to the space. And you'll see at the top where the canopy is, I've got another one of those beautiful New Orleans medallions. So these are antique oyster plates. Most are sourced from different places in New Orleans, some off eBay, some from Etsy, some from antique fairs, and then some from Moss Antiques in New Orleans is a wonderful source for antique oyster plates. And I think it's important to, when sort of building your home, and again, it's probably the last layer that you're putting in, is to create collections, because collections create interest. And don't just collect, maybe you really love abstract fine art paintings and they're on canvas, but it's important to have different types of art. So this is an installation of art of a collection of antique oyster plates that creates more interest instead of just having another flat painting on the wall. So in terms of interior design, it's good to mix it up with the types of art that you create in a space. So I just had these hung in this kind of pattern, and they act as the artwork on the wall. It's hard when you are trying to decorate a space that has a beautiful wallpaper on it, because you want to be kind of sparing in the art that you use, and that it doesn't compete too much with the backdrop of your investment in the wallpaper. Another way to sort of add jewelry to the home is to use surface bolts on some of your doors. So these are French doors that actually lead out to a little brick patio, and to dress them up, instead of putting a window treatment over them and treating them like a window, I just added some hardware here. And then another little weird thing that you may or may not want to pick up on all of our door stops, I ordered brass door stops and like got rid of the ones that were there. They're just little white ones, builder grade, that come with the house. I graduated college in 2008. Obviously, the Great Recession was going on, and everyone in my family is an attorney. My mom is a retired litigator turned oil painter. My dad's an oil and gas attorney. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, and I moved back from DC with the intention of going to law school. I then taught myself how to faux finish furniture and read everything that I could about antiques and interior design. Somehow convinced my parents at 25 to give me a loan to start my first business and open an antique shop on Magazine Street, which I did. And I did have to pay them back, by the way. And that was 14 years ago that I started. And so I had an antique shop which morphed into like a lifestyle boutique. At one point I bought a clothing store. So interior design, antiques, and then ultimately clothing. And I had that for, I think, about 11 years. And then during COVID, the city just completely shut down, and it just became sort of untenable to continue my career in that way. And so I shifted, and now I just do private interior design jobs. I have the bug for wanting to collect, and some might call it a shopping problem, but I'm considering going back into that field a little bit and just importing antiques and selling them, you know, through my website or something. But brick and mortar really isn't in the cards anymore, which makes a lot of people sad. We are now in my husband's study and home office. I think the most distinctive thing about this room is it's a change in the feel of the house. So this is a much moodier room, and I love to do that in a library or a study or a billiards room or a room that's meant to be more masculine in nature. And I used the design technique of color washing, meaning I painted the ceiling, the trim, and the walls all the same color. So it's enveloped in this envelope of a high gloss Pharaoh and Ball color. And everyone always asks me on Instagram, here's your chance to know, it is Pharaoh and Ball denim. So this color is, I think, kind of makes the entire space. Guy loves it because it's not feminine, kind of like the rest of the house has a bit of a feminine bent. My design style does too. But he likes that he can work well in here. He doesn't like to have a lot of light. He works with computers and doesn't like to have a lot of light when he's working. We did do some built-in bookshelves here, and we actually have real books along with some mementos from our relationship and from his childhood as well, interspersed in the bookshelves. I chose another interesting architectural brass fixture. This is a leaf chandelier by New Orleans artist Julie Neal again. I'm a fan of hers. And then we have a Kelly Wearstler brass, sort of more modern mid-century lamp, some Ralph Lauren sconces over there on the windowsill. And then my favorite piece in the room, other than the artwork that's in here, is this beautiful Austrian, I believe it's 18th century desk, and it has these beautiful cabriole legs, and it's got a lot of inlay and marquetry in it. And Guy actually found his own work chair, which I think this is a vintage Knoll work chair and office chair, and this is the only thing in the house other than, you know, some smaller things that I let him keep of his when we got married. But it actually works with the space. And then we complemented it with one of my favorite pieces of art in the house, which this sort of lends itself to what I was saying earlier about having different types of art on your wall and to collect them over time. This is a Jack Spencer photograph, no relation to me. He is an artist. I believe he's from Mississippi, but lives in Nashville, Tennessee. I got this through Fisher Gallery in Jackson, Mississippi, which is where I'm from. They have an amazing roster of artists, so check out Fisher Gallery if you have a chance. But I love this piece. It is Baptismal Candidates in the Mississippi Delta. And I believe the photograph is from sometime in the mid-90s, and then it's framed in this heavy gold frame. Beneath that is a vintage Burlwood mid-century bar cart. I don't generally use mid-century items, but I wanted to use a more masculine bar cart in Guy's office rather than like a brass is what I would generally do. The rug is another stark carpet that's in a custom style that's self-bound. And then I've got a very traditional sofa with an inverted Charles of London arm and a waterfall skirt next to this plaid, another traditional chair, but it's in this lovely Holland & Sherry plaid. And I think something interesting about Holland & Sherry, which is a company that's a go-to for me when I'm doing a more masculine space, is that they were actually originally, and I think still are, high-end tailors on Savile Row. And they started their interior design part of their business, the fabrics, I think maybe in the late 90s. I may be saying that wrong, but I love to use their plaids and their more masculine fabrics. And I think by having one item in the room that is in a heavier pattern, gives it more depth. And I don't generally use big pattern on large scale upholstery, but I thought that it was right in this setting. I've got another Holland & Sherry wool on the window treatments. And then another interesting thing about this room is this is another antique end table. And above it, I have this painting that I actually gave Guy for our 5th wedding anniversary. And what's special about it, I got it from Brown's Fine Art and Framing in Jackson, Mississippi, which is again where I'm from originally. And this is by the artist Tommy Goodman. And what's special about this to Guy is that his father, who's now deceased, Tommy was his father's college roommate, I think. Anyway, they're very close friends, and Tommy is a celebrated Mississippi artist. And then above that is another special piece to us. This past Christmas, our very close friends gave Guy this antique World War I French hunting rifle. And obviously we don't fire it. It's used more as a piece of art. But I think it's always nice to have things that have specific meaning to you, and it's a plus that they look good together. So that's a nice way to top off a painting if you're not going to use a gallery light or a mirror or something else. The next thing I'll point out in the space is this series of Vanity Fair gentlemen. So these are actually from the late 1800s to the 1890s, and there are a limited number of these, and you can find them. Well, it's hard to find them now, but I found them on Magazine Street at a friend's shop and then had them framed. And there's a set of 9 of them, but they're different gentlemen. And it's a nice, it's nice in scale to have, the different pieces and then just to not have another canvas in the same space. This above me is this has several meanings for Guy and myself. This is a Bill Dunlap. So Bill Dunlap, or William Dunlap, is a very famous Southern artist and Mississippi artist. And he has a series of beagles. And this is actually a lithograph that Guy got at an auction for me for my birthday probably 8 or 9 years ago. I was out of town and he went to an auction by himself, and he did really well here. I might have been upset with something else, but I'm glad that we have a Dunlap, and it has multiple meanings because we have a beagle mix busy. So beneath that is an antique map from the 1800s of the state of Mississippi. The final thing, or sort of penultimate thing I will talk about, this is the other side of that mantle that we saw in my double parlor living space. And these are some vintage or antique urns that one of my dear friends gave me for Christmas. And then this is another antique Tremont, though it's slightly different in its shape. I love an antique Tremont over a mantle. This is an antique typewriter, and it came with this note, and we received it on our wedding day from one of Guy's more eccentric friends. And he left us a very sweet note, and then this antique typewriter that sits on our shelves here. We don't use it. Let's head to the mudroom and laundry room space. Follow me. Okay, so we are now in what I use as a multifunctional space. This is both a mudroom, a laundry room, a dog washing space, a dog feeding space, as well as a flower cutting room and arranging space. There's also storage for things with all of this tall cabinetry. So this is truly a multifunctional room. We added this kind of recently in the past couple of years. Guy and I decided to, instead of adding onto the house, to just enclose a porch that was upstairs, which became my closet and dressing room. And then this porch, this was originally a porch that now has become our multifunctional mudroom and laundry room. So this is our laundry space. And it's got tons of storage. I keep all the things that I use on a regular basis up on the counter and organized. This Guy recently added as a hanging rack, although I'm not sure that I love it or that he hung it straight, but that happens sometimes when you don't hire professionals and your husband installs stuff. So this was a very pretty architectural mirror that I added when I was designing this space. And I don't know if you can tell, but I did this like special marble backsplash for on top of the washer and dryer. I try to keep my plants alive and sort of interspersed throughout the house to give the house more warmth. When you have so much stone and white and everything, you want to warm it up with live plants. This space here is very custom. We had it built for our dogs. So this is a feeding and watering station for both dogs, as well as where we keep their food and treats and everything organized. I use special hardware. I love these latches. And again, they're the unlacquered, so they have the patina on them. And I think it's okay to mix different styles of hardware in a space. So like I have latches on some of these, and then I have pulls here, and then I have, double hook pulls down here. I think as long as they're the same finish and it's appropriate in the application, it's fine. I unified this space by using several different design elements, one of which was the hardware. The other was on some of the cabinets, because they were in such a small space, so tall, I wanted to differentiate some of them, and I used these brass grills that you have to custom order. They take forever. I think they ship out of England or something, and they're hard to measure, so make sure to consult a professional if you decide to go this route. But instead of a regular cabinet front, I used these brass mesh grills, which can work in many different applications. I've used them in butlers' pantries and kitchens before, for example. Another way that I unified the design of this space was to use these brass railings. I did them here and then over there above shelving where I keep all of my flower vases and flower arranging and gardening things. The next thing that I'll talk about here is this dog bath. So most people wouldn't commit to this strong. We really needed to get them out of our bathroom and making a mess in there, and now they make a mess in here. So I had this custom dog bath built next to their dog station, and then on the other side is my flower arranging station. And I actually used more roll fixtures in here for their bath. But this is actually multifunctional for me when I have photo shoots or I'm, hosting a party or whatever. I can use big floral buckets in here, and so it will hold my my flowers before I get to arranging them. One of the things that I like to do on a weekly basis is whether I'm getting them from a wholesale florist or from a shop on Magazine Street or just from the grocery store. I love to have fresh flowers in my house. It's a hobby of mine. I know that it's expensive, but it really makes me happy. And so that's one of the things that I do for myself. And I use this station here to do it. So I have a whole other apron front farmhouse sink, and then this little bar faucet and sprayer, and then a stack of marble shelves where I keep all of my my flower vases, as well as my little copper watering pan, and then these pails I use to separate flowers out. I think it's really important for people who are interested in learning more about interior design or antiques to educate themselves. It's my opinion that you can really only speak originally on a subject when you have taken the time to learn the canon of what exists out there. And the best thing you can do to hone your skills, hone your eye, is to expose yourself, travel, and travel. And then one of the weird things I did to learn about antiques, and now my mother has been an antiques collector my entire life, so I've always been around that. And I grew up in a house with a lot of antiques. A lot of Southern homes are like that. Really focus on teaching yourself, and I would read auction catalogs. So this was when I was first starting, and I would stop and look up every single word that I didn't understand, and then make sure that I Googled and saw enough examples of one thing in order to commit that to memory. And that kind of goes, that informs the way that I design. I'm always looking to learn something more. So I guess what I would say in terms of advice to anybody who's looking for it would be just be interested. And if you are passionate about anything and interested enough in something, and then actually do the work to learn about that subject matter, I think that you can conquer anything. Now we're ready to head upstairs. Follow me. So one thing I'll point out as we head upstairs is that when I'm designing a house and in my own house, I love doing a stair runner to sort of soften it. And then I use these gold rods as another example of jewelry in the home. So I just wanted to point that out as we go up the stairs. Welcome to my primary suite. My husband and my primary suite. I have a problem with that. This room is where I spend a lot of my time, and I always want a bedroom, whether I'm designing it for a client or for myself, to feel like a retreat. So I recently made over this room. It used to have wallpaper and a lot of color, and I decided I really wanted a more modern look, and I wanted it to be calmer and have a backdrop of a white palette. So one of the tricks that you can use when you want a room to be painted all white is you can add interest by adding something like, I have a half canopy here, which adds interest into the room, and then also applied molding just directly onto the sheetrock. You don't necessarily have to do full wood paneling or wainscoting. You can just do a chair rail and then some applied molding, which is what I did here. The bed was custom made by my upholsterer here in New Orleans. I just showed him a photo, an inspiration photo and a drawing, and he can really make anything, and it's quite impressive. And then as far as bedding, I like to actually change up my bedding. So right now what you're looking at is some custom Euros, and this is one of my favorite fabrics. I believe it's a Scalamandra, and I like that it pulls out, well, first of all, I like that it is an organic fabric against a more modern design of a bed, and that it pulls out this beautiful blue silk that I have on the interior of the canopy. So it's adding interest. So when I do the bed, I always use 2 king sleeper pillows, and my favorite inserts are actually, it's unexpected, but Boll and Branch has the best inserts in my opinion. So I use 2 on each side and then lay them flat with the this part going in, which is something I learned. And then in front of the 3 Euroshams on a king bed, I've got these 2 king shams in front, and then I always use a bolster. A lot of people find this annoying. My husband makes fun of me, too many pillows, but I love a really well done over the top bed. So underneath that, I've got a coverlet that I tuck in and then a duvet at the end, and I am freezing all the time, so I pull this up and he kicks it off. The next thing that I think is interesting in this space are these, it's hard to find a pair these days. So this is a pair of antique Biedermeier nightstands that I actually found when I was in Dallas doing Kips Bay in 2023 from the Blueprint store. And they were a little spendy and quite the investment, but I love the proportion. I love the look of them, and I will probably keep them for forever. There are many things in my house that I could part with, but I don't think these are one of them. So they're paired with some modern Ralph Lauren lamps, and then above the nightstands on either side, I've got these beautiful Venetian mirrors. So it's another pair, an antique pair of Venetian mirrors that I found while I was in Parma maybe 10 years ago, a long time ago. So the biggest antique market in the world, or antique fair in the world, happens twice a year in Parma, Italy. And if you're looking for antiques, that's something that you may want to seek out. They're one of my favorite things that I've bought over the years, and I've moved them around a lot. The next thing that I'll talk about in this room is one of my most prized possessions. This is this is Queen Elizabeth, and it is a Hunt Sloanham. So Hunt Sloanham is a very much sought after and renowned Louisiana. We could probably say he's New Orleans based, although he lives outside of New Orleans, I think on an old plantation, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he is most well known for his butterflies, finches, and for this hatching that he does on his paintings. And then he always puts them in these antique frames. And I love this painting for so many reasons. I went to a reception at Martine Chassagne Gallery, and if you don't know Martine, check her out. She is lovely personally and professionally. I just had to have it as soon as I saw it. So I didn't even ask the price, which was a little regrettable, but I had to have it. It came home with me that evening, and Guy wasn't even that angry with me, so win-win. I love that it's hot pink, and I love that the subject matter is Queen Elizabeth and that it's unexpected. And I think it has a little bit more value because of that. Another piece of art I could show you is because we have one of our Beagle busy, we had another one commissioned from Jason Horton of our lab Birdie over here. And she goes well in this room because of the backdrop, the coloring of the painting. It kind of picks up on the blue of the half canopy. This last piece of art that I will tell you about is the first piece of art that Guy and I purchased together as a couple. And this is, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Lebec, and there's a gallery that I also cannot remember the name of on Royal Street in New Orleans. And he is from Normandy, and he's known for creating these seascapes, but they usually are like blood red or bright yellow, and we wanted something more subdued. So we went with a very small, very pretty painting of his, and Guy is a 50-ton captain and a huge sailor, so we had to do something with that subject matter. over the past 2 years, we did an addition by enclosing the porch on this side. And when we did that, it opened up our primary closet to become something very special to me. It is multifunctional. It is my linen closet, but it also has a mini fridge, a snack bar and mini bar, and then like backstock organized all of my sort of toiletry products that I might need. And then this tower was added for storage for my luggage and linens and all of that. But it's got this beautiful Schumacher striped wallpaper. And then I've got 3 hampers down here. So one's for cleaning, lights and darks. And then right here is my little mini bar. I've also got one of those Smeg hot water heater things to make tea in the middle of the afternoon. And I may have gone a little overboard with the candy, but I enjoy it. So that's that space. Now I'm going to take you into what became our closet and my dressing area. So downstairs I showed you where we enclosed a porch. And again, we're working with very small spaces because this is New Orleans. We didn't want to take on like changing the roof line and all of that. So we just enclosed this porch off of our primary bedroom, and it became my dressing room and a closet. So I sit here to dry my hair and put on my makeup every day. And then these cabinets that we had custom built out outfit all of our clothes. For visual interest, I added these silken grass cloth panels from Philip Jeffries that are actually chinoiserie. I chose them because they had a little bit of metallic in them. And then I'm also a big fan of chinoiserie, which you'll see a little later in the tour. I love anything with birds or butterflies on it, but it had the right coloring to sort of pull the blue in from the canopy and the accents from my bedroom. I'm always looking for things or bringing things from the past into my life. So I had some leftover beautiful, I think this is a Schumacher silk damask fabric that has like a gingham check underneath. And I found this old valet that's really meant for a man, and had my upholsterer make this feminine valet stand for me that usually has my ruffle robe that I use to get dressed with in the morning. Just a fun little tidbit. You know, I think the most popular room, according to the internet, is my husband's study, which we'll visit in a little while when we walk through the home. But and that's because it's color washed in like a dark Pharaoh and Ball, very popular color apparently. For me, I love the double parlor because it gave me the opportunity to use try out different layouts and create different little conversational areas and create a space that has a truly multi-purpose use. I'm not gonna give you the best answer on this because I also absolutely love my new home office that I made I designed it probably a year ago. Beautiful Gracie wallpaper, and it's just, I was allowed to be ultra feminine in that space because I was only accommodating myself. I think if I had to pick one tip that I use the most, other than just being very aware of scale, I think scale and proportion is so important. Like visual reasoning is very important in interior design, and to me it's very intuitive. But I would say the one rule that you really could take from me is that I always put something dark in a space. So like I tend to use a lot of whites, creams, neutrals, punctuated by accents of color. Like for example, like abstract original art that has color in it, or pillows that have color in it, or maybe an accent upholstery piece. But I always try to anchor a space by using, number one, an antique, and number two, maybe it's a burl wood piece. Maybe it's a Louis XVI chest that has just a beautiful patina on it. Maybe it's, like what's next to me is a beautiful Art Deco gueridon. I've got another little marquetry gueridon, Italian gueridon on the other side. And I think it's important to use tension and contrast in design. And so if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be to use something dark when you're using a lot of light. In our primary suite is, and we have not renovated our bathroom since we moved in. What I did do upstairs everywhere was I had a millwork shop create all new doors, and then I put pretty hardware. We talked about surface bolts earlier, but a way you can dress up your space is to put pretty hardware on it. But inside here, I just want to show you, I did really pretty silk drapery, a Murano-inspired light fixture that was designed by Paloma Contreras, a contemporary and friend of mine. And then this is another New Orleans artist, Alexis Walter, and I absolutely love her. And this piece she actually gave me, she gifted it to me when I moved into my first house, which wasn't, this is the house right before this. But I will always cherish this piece. Alexis is a very talented artist as well as one of the nicest people I've ever met. So I think about that every time I look at it. And then I also enjoy taking baths in this luxurious freestanding bathtub. Now I'm going to take you into our guest bedroom. So we're now in our guest bedroom, and the first question I always get about this room is, what is the paint color? And I use the color washing technique again. So again, using the same color, but I didn't vary the sheen. So this is all high gloss Benjamin Moore. The color is called Tissue Pink. And I selected this color for several reasons. Number one, I love to go uber feminine in a space sometimes, and I think that a guest bedroom is the right application for that, or can be the right application for that. And I wanted to choose a light, soft pink that wasn't too bubblegum and it wasn't too bright. And tissue pink also is a very flattering color for your skin. So a little tidbit from history is, you know, before they had electricity or used maybe a lot of makeup or something, like they would use paint colors that made you look younger or were flattering to your skin. So a hue like this would have been popular a couple hundred years ago, but that's not really why I chose it. I chose it because it's pretty. The bed has a half canopy over it in this pretty ivory silk, and then again, I had my upholsterer make this bed, so it's custom made in New Orleans, and I had the headboard made higher than usual. Usually a headboard's about 65 inches high, or sometimes a little bit higher, but this one's, you know, 80 something. But I wanted you to be able to see the beautiful silk Schumacher velvet that I used. The linens are actually Leontine linens that I had custom made for my Kips Bay show house. So, and again, I'm always changing out my linens in my house, but I thought this was a great space for me to repurpose the linens that I use for my Kips Bay room. Oh, I love these drapes in here. They have this beautiful Samuel & Sons trim on the leading edge that really brings out the coloring of the room. And then these nightstands behind me are Italian antique neoclassical style nightstands. And then behind that, I just did 2 panels of de Gournay Badminton, which is one of my favorite chinoiserie wallpapers. Now I'm going to take you into my office. Welcome to my home office. So this is the final room I'm going to show you today. And this is one of my favorite spaces in the house, and I recently completed it. I used to have a big commercial building where I ran my company out of on Magazine Street, but I sold it last year and decided to create a studio in my backyard, and then I used this office. So the walls are covered in a metallic Gracie wallpaper, which is one of my absolute favorites and I really think sets the stage. And then I used a really plush stark carpet and I made it larger than you probably would normally do it, and only did like a 2 or 3 inch reveal of the wood all the way around. And then another one of my favorite things about this room, other than just the plain silk drapery or the antiques that are in this space, this is part of a set of fauteuils that I found at the Marshall Puce a few years ago when I was visiting Paris with my mother. And then this is a Louis XVI daybed. So this room can double as another space for a guest, as well as a space for me to relax after I finish working and watch a little TV or something. This is my desk, which I had covered in a high gloss Farrow and Ball color called drop cloth, which brings out like the neutral tones that are in the paper. And then I have a very contemporary task chair. And then behind that, I love pairing the traditional light Gracie wallpaper with the moody, sort of more modern piece of art above it. So this is an Adrian Broom photograph, again from Martine Chasson Gallery. I don't know the name of it exactly, but I do know that it is it's a photograph of a famous English estate where she was staying in residence for a few months, and then the point of the painting was to catch the light just right. It's a little spooky when you really look at it. So that's one of my favorite pieces of art that I have. There are two more pieces I'd like to discuss while we're in this room. This is my favorite mirror that I own. This is a larger Venetian mirror, and I love a Venetian. And then this chest. So this chest was in my entryway for a long time, but I decided to move it up here because I wanted to be able to look at it every day. It is a Louis XVI directoire style fluted leg, a 2-drawer commode with this special carving here. So you can see it's a bow. And then I love the hardware. I don't think this is the original hardware or the original escutcheons, but I bought it largely because of the hardware, and it just has a simple marble top. Home to me is an extension of my personality, and it probably has more meaning to me in an aesthetic way than most people because it's what I do for a living, and I'm just naturally drawn to beauty and creating beauty, and that's important to me as a person. But I have found in my practice of interior design over the time that I've done it, the years that I've done it, that creating a space that's truly a sanctuary for you, that allows you to have respite and to feel calm and to feel self-possessed is so important to functioning, especially for people, maybe you have little kids, or maybe you have a high-stress job, or maybe, the wife is taking care of the little kids and the husband has a high-stress job, or maybe they both do, or maybe it's inverted, whatever it is. You want to be able to retreat after a long day. And I think that aesthetics and the way that your home is laid out and the functionality of that, both the practical aspect of actually being able to live in your space, as well as the aesthetic value, are just so important. In addition to that, what home means to me is really a true sense of place. I am a deep South Southerner at the heart, and from Mississippi, and I always want to have collections of things, things that I've accumulated over time, pieces that mean something to me, a piece of fine art that I picked up when I was traveling, next to me. On my side table is a book that my father gave me, a first edition of a book that a relative of mine won or was nominated for a Pulitzer for. So like just little things that you collect over time that mean something to you can really lend richness and layering to your home and make it feel like yours. And if you choose to hire an interior designer to help you do that, maybe you have a full-time job that demands so much of you that you can't do this for yourself, or you just don't have the interior vocabulary in order to execute a space well, and you need to hire an interior designer. Well, I think it's important for the interior designer to always consider and get to know the person whose home that it is and the way that they use the space, and really be attuned to that. And I always tell clients that it takes time. It takes time to create a space that really feels like your own. My home changes all the time. I move things around. I accumulate new things. Just don't be impatient. It's great to get the basics down, get upholstery, rugs, drapery, a bed, nightstands, whatever. But the hardest part about really making a space feel like home is the layering that takes place. And you can do that with collections. You can do that with plants. You can do that with fine art.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.